The sun was a white iron hammer striking the anvil of the New Mexico desert. Heat shimmered off the canyon floor in waves that distorted the horizon, turning the distant mesas into fluid, trembling ghosts. Eli Vance slumped forward in his saddle, his forehead resting against the coarse, sweat-matted mane of his bay gelding. Every hoofbeat sent a fresh jolt of agony tearing through his abdomen, a hot and jagged line of fire that radiated from the dark stain on his left side. He had been riding for 3 days since the ambush at Cross Creek. 3 days of bleeding. 3 days of watching his own life leak out onto the saddle leather and the dusty earth. He was 24 years old, though the reflection he had seen in a horse trough a week ago looked 40. The war had done that to him first, stripping the softness from his face, and the years drifting west as a scout and drifter had finished the carving. Now, the bullet lodged in his gut threatened to erase him entirely. Just keep moving, he told himself. The voice in his head was thin and reedy. The horse, a sturdy beast he had won in a card game in Santa Fe, stumbled. Eli gripped the pommel, his knuckles white. He risked a glance backward. The canyon behind him was empty, a winding snake of red rock and scrub brush. The bounty hunters, 3 of them, led by a man with a scar across his nose named Silas, were not visible. But Eli knew they were there. Men like Silas did not give up when the bounty was $500. They tracked blood like wolves. Eli guided the horse toward the shadow of the canyon wall. There was a dry riverbed ahead, an arroyo choked with tumbleweeds and driftwood from flash floods past. If he could make it to the shade, he could rest, just for a moment. He slid from the saddle, his boots hitting the sand with a heavy thud that rattled his teeth. The world tilted violently to the left. He grabbed the stirrup leather to keep from falling, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. The smell of sage and dry rot filled his nose. He tethered the horse to a twist of dead mesquite and sat down heavily in the dirt. His hand went to his side. The makeshift bandage, a strip torn from his flannel shirt, was stiff and black with dried blood, but the center was wet and fresh. He lifted the cloth, peeking at the angry, purple-rimmed hole. It smelled of copper and sickness. He leaned his head back against the sandstone. Above, a hawk circled in the bleached sky. He closed his eyes, just for a second. When he opened them, the shadows had stretched long and thin across the canyon floor, and he was not alone. They stood in a semicircle around him, silent as the stones themselves. There were 4 of them. They were young, perhaps 16 or 17, dressed in strange motley of buckskin and woven wool, their hair braided tight against their skulls. They held bows, short, recurve bows made of horn and wood, with arrows nocked and drawn. Eli blinked, thinking them a hallucination born of fever. He reached for the Colt Navy revolver at his hip, before his fingers could brush the walnut grip. A thwack of disturbed air whizzed past his ear. An arrow stood quivering in the sand an inch from his hand. He froze. The girl who had lost the arrow lowered her bow slowly. She did not speak. She jerked her chin toward his hands, a silent command to raise them. "I ain't got no quarrel with you," Eli croaked. His voice was like grinding gravel. They did not respond. 2 of them moved forward, their movements fluid and soundless. They moved not like soldiers, but like hunters approaching a trapped animal. One kicked the pistol away from his reach. The other grabbed his wrists. He tried to struggle, but the pain in his gut flared so bright it blinded him. He cried out, a shameful, guttural sound, and slumped forward. Rough hands caught him. He felt a rope biting into his wrists, binding them behind his back. They hauled him up. He expected them to kill him, or rob him. Instead, they lashed him to a travois constructed of poles and hide, hitched behind a mule he hadn't seen until now. The journey was a blur of pain and unconsciousness. He stared up at the sky as it turned from searing blue to bruised purple. He felt the incline, the mules straining as they began to climb. They were leaving the canyon floor, heading up a narrow, treacherous switchback trail that clung to the cliff face like a spiderweb. He passed out again. When he woke, the air was cooler, thinner. He was lying on a mat of woven rushes in a room with walls of smooth, cool adobe. A fire burned in a small hearth, casting dancing orange light against the ceiling. He tried to sit up, but his body refused to obey. He was stripped to his trousers. His shirt and boots were gone. A shadow detached itself from the corner of the room. "Lie still," a voice said. It was a woman's voice, low and resonant, sounding like wind moving through a canyon. Eli turned his head. A woman sat in a high-backed wooden chair. She was older. Her hair a striking shock of iron gray pulled back severely from a face that was a map of hard years and harsh weather. She wore a dress of dark wool, practical and unadorned. But around her neck hung a silver locket that caught the firelight. "Where am I?" Eli whispered. "You are in the roost," she said. She stood and moved toward him. She walked with a slight limp, leaning on a polished hickory cane. "And you are bleeding on my bedding." She stood over him, looking down with eyes that were dark and unreadable. She did not look like a nurse. She looked like a general assessing a battlefield. "Who are you?" "I am called Martha," she said, "though most here simply call me Matriarch." She gestured to the door, and two of the girls he had seen earlier entered. They carried a basin of steaming water and a tray of instruments. They did not look at Eli. Their eyes were fixed on Martha, awaiting command. "Hold him," Martha said. The girls moved instantly, pinning Eli's shoulders and legs to the mat. Their grip was surprisingly strong. "Wait," Eli gasped. "I don't mean no harm. I'm just passing through." "You are dying," Martha said flatly. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing arms that were sinewy and scarred. "If you wish to pass through to the other side, keep struggling. If you wish to stay on this earth, be still." She dipped a cloth into the hot water and began to clean the wound. The pain was absolute. Eli arched his back, a scream tearing from his throat. The girls held him firm, their faces impassive masks. Martha worked with brutal efficiency. She probed the wound with her fingers, digging for the lead. Eli saw white spots dancing in his vision. He looked into her eyes, pleading for it to stop. For a second, her hand paused. She looked at him, really looked at him, and the hardness in her expression fractured. She saw the terror in his eyes, the desperate animal fear of a young man realizing his own mortality. It was a look she recognized. "Breathe," she commanded, her voice dropping an octave, becoming softer. "Look at me, boy. Look at me. Do not go into the dark." She found the bullet. With a pair of long forceps, she dug it out. The agony was a thunderclap that shattered his consciousness, and the world went black. Eli woke to the sound of wind and the rhythmic thud of impact. He was alone in the room. A pitcher of water sat on a low stool beside him. His side was bandaged tightly with clean linen, and the throbbing pain had dulled to a manageable ache. He sat up slowly, testing his limits. He was weak, his muscles trembling like overstressed ropes, but he was alive. He drank from the pitcher, the water cool and sweet. He stood, bracing himself against the wall, and shuffled to the window. It was not glass, but an open shutter looking out over a sheer drop. The settlement was carved into the side of the cliff, a series of adobe structures built into the natural alcoves of the rock. It was a fortress, accessible only by the narrow trail he had been dragged up. Below, the canyon floor was a ribbon of brown and green. 2,000 feet down, in the central plaza, a flat expanse of rock. A dozen figures were moving. They were all women. Some were girls, no older than 12. Others were grown women. They were dressed in trousers and loose shirts. They were training. Eli watched, mesmerized. A tall woman with a braid down to her waist was barking commands. The girls moved in unison, drawing knives from their belts, slashing at straw dummies, retreating, and striking again. Their movements were sharp, disciplined, and lethal. He saw the girls who had found him. They were practicing with bows, sending arrow after arrow into targets painted on hay bales 50 yards away. They did not miss. It was a world turned upside down. In the towns Eli had known, Abilene, Dodge City, Tombstone, women were wives, mothers, or whores. They were protected or used. Here, they were soldiers. He looked for men. He saw none. A sudden urge to flee gripped him. He was a stranger in a fortress of women who trained to kill. He was wounded, unarmed, and exposed. He needed to leave. He scanned the room. His clothes were folded on a chair, cleaned of blood. His boots were there. His gun belt was missing. He dressed hurriedly, wincing as he pulled his trousers over his bandaged waist. He pulled on his boots and stumbled toward the door. It was unlocked. He stepped out into the bright sunlight. The air was thin and crisp. He kept to the shadows of the overhang, moving toward where the trail descended. "He is awake," a voice called out. Eli froze. The training in the plaza stopped. Every head turned toward him. A dozen pairs of eyes locked onto him. The tall woman who had been leading the drill walked toward him. She had a scar running from her ear to her jaw. She did not look friendly. "Go back to your bed," she said. "I'm leaving," Eli said. He tried to stand tall, but he was swaying. "You will fall before you reach the first switchback," she said. "And we will not carry you up again. I'll take my chances." Eli took a step. His leg buckled. He caught himself on the wall, breathing hard. The woman watched him with contempt. "Men," she spat, "always thinking they are stronger than the earth itself." She signaled to two of the younger girls. "Put him back." Eli tried to push them away, but he had nothing left. His vision blurred. The stone beneath his feet seemed to dissolve. He felt himself falling. And then the familiar darkness took him again. Night had fallen when the door opened again. Eli lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling beams. He felt humiliated. He had been a scout for the 2nd Texas Cavalry. He had survived the wilderness campaign, and now he was a prisoner of a group of women living on a rock. Martha entered. She carried a tray with a bowl of broth and a cup of steaming tea. She set it down and pulled the chair close to the bed. "You are foolish," she said quietly. "You tore 2 of your stitches." "I don't like being a prisoner," Eli said. "You are not a prisoner. You are a patient, though your behavior suggests you belong in a cradle." She dipped a spoon into the broth. "Eat." Eli turned his head away. "I ain't hungry." "I did not ask if you were hungry. I told you to eat." Her voice had that steel edge again. "I wasted good medicine on you. I will not let you die of starvation because of pride." Eli looked at her. There was no pity in her face, but there was no cruelty either. Just a pragmatic determination. He opened his mouth, and she fed him. The broth was rich, tasting of venison and sage. "Who are you people?" Eli asked after a few swallows. "We are those who have left," Martha said, "or those who were left behind." "Left what?" "The world of men," she said. "The world of anger and ownership." She set the bowl down. "Now, you will tell me the truth. Who are you, and who is hunting you?" "Nobody's hunting me." Eli lied. Martha sighed. She reached out and touched his forehead, checking for fever. Her hand was rough, callous against his skin. "You were shot in the back, or near enough to it. You were riding a horse into the ground. You have the look of a rabbit that hears the hounds. Do not lie to me, boy. I have lived too long to be entertained by fiction." Eli looked at the ceiling. The fire popped in the hearth. "My name is Eli Vance." "And the wound?" "Eli Vance?" "Bounty hunters," he said softly. "3 of them. What is the price?" $500. Martha raised an eyebrow. "That is a high price for a boy." "What did you do? Kill a governor?" "I killed a man who didn't deserve to live," Eli said. The memory rose up, bile in his throat. "But the law didn't see it that way. The law rarely does." She waited. She was good at waiting. Silence was a weapon she used with skill. "It was after the war," Eli began, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I came west with my brother, Caleb. We were going to start a ranch in Arizona. We had some money saved, Army script, mostly." He closed his eyes. "We fell in with a man named Miller, Captain Miller. He called himself, said he knew where there was gold in the San Juans. We trusted him. We were stupid. Trust is often expensive, Martha murmured. He didn't want partners. Eli said, he wanted our stake. He waited until we were asleep. I woke up when I heard the shot. He put a bullet in Caleb's head. Eli's voice cracked. He hadn't spoken this aloud to anyone. Not in 2 years. I grabbed my gun. I was faster than he expected. I shot him. Gut shot him. Just like this. He gestured to his own side. He took 3 days to die. I watched him. I didn't help him. Martha watched him, her face impassive. And for this, there is a bounty? Miller had a brother too, Eli said. A judge in El Paso. He put the price on me. Murder, he called it. And so you run. I run, Eli agreed. Martha sat back. She studied him, her fingers tracing the silver locket at her throat. I had a son, she said suddenly. Her voice was distant. He would be your age now, perhaps a year older. Eli looked at her, surprised by the admission. What happened to him? The Comanches took him, she said. 20 years ago, during a raid near the Pecos River. I'm sorry, Eli said. My husband. She paused, a bitter smile touching her lips. My husband was a good man, or so I thought. But when the boy was taken, he blamed me, said I was not watchful, said I was weak. She looked into the fire. He left me a month later. Took the wagon and the horses and rode back east to find a wife who wouldn't lose his heirs. He left me on the homestead with nothing but winter coming on. How did you survive? I learned, she said. I learned that a woman alone is prey. So I decided not to be alone. And I decided not to be prey. She stood up, the moment of vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had come. She was the matriarch again. Rest, Eli Vance. If your bounty hunters come to the canyon floor, they will find nothing but rock and silence. You are safe here, for now. 2 days later, the fever came. It rolled over him like a dark tide, hot and suffocating. Eli tossed on the narrow bed, sweat soaking the sheets. He was back in Virginia. The trees were exploding. Men were screaming for their mothers. He was crawling through the mud, looking for Caleb. But every face he turned over was Captain Miller, laughing with blood in his teeth. Caleb, he shouted. Caleb, get down! He felt hands on him. Cool, firm hands. Shh, you are safe. He opened his eyes. The room was swimming. A face hovered above him. It was soft, blurred by the heat in his own skull. It looked like his mother. Mama? He whispered. He felt a wet cloth on his chest. Someone was bathing him, wiping the burning sweat from his skin. The water felt like salvation. Quiet now, the voice said. It was Martha. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, a basin of water on her lap. She wrung out the cloth and wiped his neck, her touch surprisingly gentle. She was humming a low, tuneless melody. Eli stared at her. The fever stripped away his defenses, stripped away the hard shell he had built around himself since the war. He felt small. He felt broken. He looked at Martha's face, the lines around her eyes, the scar on her chin, the loose strands of gray hair escaping her bun. She looked like the only solid thing in a world of smoke. A desperate, aching need for comfort seized him. Not a man's need for a woman, but a child's need for forgiveness. He reached up. His trembling hand cupped her cheek. Don't leave me, he mumbled. Please. Martha froze. For a heartbeat. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. A look of profound sorrow crossed her face. A ghost of the mother she had been before the Comanches, before the winter, before the roost. Then, her eyes snapped open. The steel returned. She slapped him. It wasn't a vicious blow, but it was sharp. It cracked through the fever haze, stinging his cheek. Eli recoiled, his hand dropping back to the sheet. He blinked, the shock clearing his mind slightly. Martha stood up abruptly, the water in the basin sloshing. She breathed heavily, her chest rising and falling. She looked down at him, and her expression was a war between anger and pity. Do not mistake me, she hissed. And do not mistake this place. She did not leave. She could have walked out, leaving him to burn in his fever. But she set the basin down on the table with a clatter. She dipped the cloth again, wrung it out with snapping force, and returned to the bed. "I am not your mother," she said, her voice steady but hard. "And I am not your whore. I am the one keeping you alive. You will remember that." She continued to wipe his brow, her strokes efficient, impersonal now. But she stayed. She stayed until the fever broke in the gray hours of the morning. When Eli woke the next day, the fever was gone, leaving him hollowed out but clear-headed. The pain in his side had receded to a dull throb. Martha was there, standing by the window, looking out at the sunrise. "You can stay," she said without turning around. Eli propped himself up on his elbows. "Ma'am?" She turned. "You can stay until you are healed, until you can ride without tearing yourself open." "Thank you," Eli said. "Do not thank me yet," she said. She walked over to him, leaning on her cane. "You will work when you are able. You will haul water. You will mend tools. You will make yourself useful." "I can do that," Eli said. "And," she said, leaning in close, her dark eyes boring into his, "you will keep your eyes to yourself. The girls here, they are not for you. They have found peace here, away from the hunger of men. If you touch one of them, if you even look at one of them with intent, I will not banish you." She tapped her cane on the stone floor. "I will throw you from this cliff myself." Eli swallowed. He saw the truth in her eyes. She meant every word. "I understand," he said. "Good." Martha straightened up. "Now get up. There's wood to be split, and one-handed or not. You eat, so you work." She turned and walked out of the room. Eli watched her go, listening to the tap-tap-tap of her cane fading down the hall. He looked out the window at the vast, empty sky of New Mexico. He was alive. He was hidden. But he was in a cage of hawks, and he knew, with a sinking certainty, that the hardest part of his journey had just begun. The canyon air was thin and tasted of limestone dust, as the days turned into a week, and the week stretched toward 2. Eli Vance found that his world had shrunk to the confines of the stone ledge and the adobe buildings that clung to it like swallow nests. He was healing. The fire in his gut had cooled to a dull, throbbing ache that only flared when he moved too quickly or lifted something too heavy. His strength was returning, filling his limbs slowly, like water rising in a dry well. He spent his mornings sitting on a wooden bench near the forge, whittling a piece of ironwood and watching. It was the only thing he could do. He watched the rhythm of the roost, the way the sun moved across the plaza, and most of all, he watched the women. They were a hive, and Martha was the queen. But not in the way he had read about in storybooks. There was no softness in the way they looked at her. When she walked across the packed earth of the plaza, leaning on her hickory cane, the chatter stopped. The girls did not run to her for comfort. They straightened their spines. They did not look at her as a mother who would kiss a scraped knee. They looked at her as a living blade, a weapon that had been forged in a fire they could only imagine. They revered her sharpness. They feared her dullness. Eli saw the way the tall woman with the scar, he learned her name was Sarah, deferred to Martha with a nod that was more military salute than greeting. He saw how the younger girls watched Martha's hands when she spoke, as if her fingers traced invisible maps of survival in the air. He felt useless sitting there. A man who could not work was a man who did not eat. That was the code of the range. And though Martha fed him without complaint, the bread tasted like charity. On the 10th day, he found his way to the corral at the far end of the ledge, where 4 mules and 2 horses were kept. The fence was in disrepair, the rails chewed by weather and rot. A section of the gate dragged in the dirt, the leather hinges dried and cracking. Eli found a bucket of tallow and a strip of raw hide in the tack shed. He sat on the ground, gritting his teeth against the pull in his side, and began to work the tallow into the stiff leather. He took his knife and trimmed the rot from the gatepost, carving a new joint where the wood had splintered. Sarah found him there an hour later. She stood over him, blocking the sun, her shadow falling long across the dust. "You should be resting," she said. I have rested enough, Eli replied without looking up. He worked the grease into the leather with his thumb. The hinges on this gate are screaming loud enough to wake the dead. If you need to move quietly at night, this gate will kill you. Sarah watched him for a long moment. She did not thank him. She simply turned and walked away. But that evening, when the stew was served, there was an extra piece of dried venison in his bowl. He began to find other things. He sharpened the axes that had grown dull from chopping piñón wood. He mended the harness for the pack mule. He did not ask for permission, and he did not ask for praise. He simply saw what was broken and made it whole. It was the only way he knew to pay for the blood he had left on their sheets. One afternoon, while he was braiding a new lead rope from strips of cowhide, he felt eyes on him. He looked up to see one of the younger girls standing a few yards away. It was the one called Fala. She was perhaps 14, with eyes as black as obsidian and hair that hung in a thick braid down her back. She was the one who had put the arrow near his hand in the canyon. She watched his hands moving over the leather, braiding the 3 strands into a tight, uniform cord. You weave tight, she said. It was the first time she had spoken to him. Loose braids break, Eli said. He kept his rhythm, over and under, over and under. A loose rope will snap when the steer hits the end of it. We do not herd steers here, Fala said. A rope is a rope, Eli said. It does not matter what you catch. The knot has to hold. He finished the braid and tied off the end with a complicated knot, pulling it tight with his teeth. He held it out to her. She took it, running her fingers over the rough texture. Can you use it? She asked. Eli stood up slowly. The pain in his side was a low hum. He took the rope back. There was a distinct coil to it, a life that came from the tension of the braid. He looked around the corral. There was a fence post sticking up about 20 feet away. He built a loop, feeding the rope through the hondo knot he had tied. He swung it once, twice, the loop opening into a perfect circle above his head, spinning with a low hiss. With a flick of his wrist, he sent it flying. The loop settled over the post and snapped shut as he jerked the slack. Fala's eyes widened. Show me, she said. Eli hesitated. He looked toward the main house. Martha was not there, but he felt the weight of the prohibition. You teach, you fight. He looked back at the girl. She was eager, her weight on the balls of her feet. It is in the wrist, Eli said softly. He loosened the loop and walked back to her. Not the arm. If you use your arm, you tell the animal you are coming. If you use your wrist, the rope just appears. He handed her the coil. She tried to mimic his motion, but her arm was stiff, her throw clumsy. The rope collapsed in the dirt halfway to the post. She frowned, frustration creasing her forehead. Relax, Eli said. He stepped behind her. He reached out, hesitating for a second before taking her right hand in his. His hand was rough and brown, hers small and calloused. Keep your elbow down. Like this. He guided her arm, feeling the tension in her small muscles. He swung her arm in a slow circle, letting her feel the weight of the loop. Release it when it feels heaviest. He whispered, now. She threw. The rope sailed out, not perfect, but it hit the post before sliding off. Fala laughed. It was a bright, sharp sound that echoed off the canyon walls. Again, she said. Eli retrieved the rope. He watched her face, the concentration, the determination, and suddenly, he was not in New Mexico. He was in a paddock in East Texas, the air thick with humidity. He was holding a smaller hand. Caleb was 6 years old, his teeth missing, his laughter bubbling up as he tried to lasso the family dog. Watch me, Eli, watch me! A wave of grief hit Eli so hard he almost staggered. The canyon blurred. The girl in front of him was not Fala. She was a ghost of the brother he had failed to save. The brother he had buried in a shallow grave under a cottonwood tree, while the man who killed him rode away with their future in his saddlebags. Eli? Fala asked. He blinked, the memory receding but leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. He dropped the rope. Keep your elbow down, he said, his voice rasping. Practice. He turned and walked away quickly, heading for the solitude of the cliff edge. He did not see the women watching him from the shadows of the plaza. He did not see Martha standing in the doorway of the main house, her eyes dark and knowing. That night, the wind picked up, howling through the canyon like a mournful choir. Eli sat by the small fire in the common room, staring into the flames. The other women had retired to their quarters, leaving him alone with the crackle of the piñón wood. The door opened, and Martha entered. She did not have her cane. She moved silently, crossing the room to pour herself a cup of water from the clay pitcher. She stood by the hearth, the firelight carving deep shadows into her face. "You have a way with the girl," she said. Eli did not look up. "She is quick. She wants to learn. She wants to learn everything," Martha said. "She has never seen a man who does not want to kill her or sell her. You are a curiosity." "I am just a drifter," Eli said. "You are a liar," Martha said. She sat down on the bench opposite him. The firelight caught the silver locket at her throat. "I watched you today. I watched you teach her." "I didn't do anything improper," Eli said, defensiveness creeping into his tone. "I just showed her how to throw a loop." "I know what you did," Martha said. Her voice was low. "I saw your face. You looked at her, but you did not see her. You saw someone else." Eli gripped his knees. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. "Who was it?" Martha asked. Eli closed his eyes. "My brother," he said. "His name was Caleb. He was the one who died?" "Yes." "And you taught him?" "I taught him everything," Eli said. The words felt heavy, like stones he was spitting out. "I taught him to ride. I taught him to shoot. I taught him how to throw a rope. I taught him to trust people. And that is why he is dead." Eli looked at her. Her gaze was unflinching. "Yes," he whispered, "because I taught him that the world was a place where you could build something. I didn't teach him that the world is a mouth that wants to eat you." Martha nodded slowly. She took a sip of water. "You teach like you are saying goodbye," she said. "You teach with grief in your hands. It makes the lesson heavy." "How else am I supposed to teach?" Eli asked bitterly. "You teach to survive," Martha said. "You teach so that when you are gone, they do not need you. That is the only love that matters in this country." She leaned forward. "I had a son," she said. "I told you he was taken, but that is only half the truth." Eli waited. "He was not taken as a child," she said. "He was taken as a man. His name was William. He was 18. She looked into the fire, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "When my husband left, William became the man of the house. He worked until his hands bled. He built the first structures here, on this ledge. He believed we could be safe." "What happened?" Eli asked. "It was not Comanches," Martha said. "It was the army. A patrol came up the canyon. They said we were squatters. They said this land belonged to the territory. They wanted to move us. They wanted other things." Her face hardened into stone. William stood at the bottom of the trail. He had a rifle and 10 rounds of ammunition. He told them to turn back. They laughed at him. "They started up the switchbacks." She paused, and Eli saw a tremor in her hand. "He killed 4 of them before they brought the mountain gun to bear. They shelled the lower trail. The rock slide took him. He is buried under 1,000 tons of stone at the gate of my house." Silence stretched between them. "Thick and heavy," I gathered the women. Martha continued softly. "The ones who had nowhere else to go. We went down in the night. We took their guns. We took their horses. We left their bodies for the buzzards. And we came back up here." She looked at Eli. "No man has stepped foot in my private chambers since that day. No man has touched me. I became the matriarch because I had to be iron. Iron does not weep. Iron does not hold hands." Eli looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the woman beneath the scar tissue. He saw the vast, terrifying loneliness she carried like a shield. "You miss him," Eli said. "Every hour of every day," Martha said. "But I do not teach the girls to miss him. I teach them to shoot so they do not end up like him." She stood up. Her movement was abrupt, breaking the spell. "Go to sleep. Eli Vance. Tomorrow there is more fence to mend." She walked away, leaving him alone with the dying fire and the ghosts that crowded the room. The dream came 3 nights later. It was always the same. The smell of sulfur and wet earth, the sound of the bugle, discordant and panicked. Eli was running through the smoke, his boots slipping in the mud. He was looking for Caleb, but the faces of the dead turned toward him, and they all had Miller's eyes. They opened their mouths to scream, but only sand poured out. Then the ground opened up. He was falling into the dark, cold earth. Eli woke with a gasp, his body convulsing. He was on his feet before he was fully conscious, stumbling out of the room, into the cool night air of the plaza. He needed to breathe. He needed to escape the suffocation of the dream. He collapsed against the adobe wall of the storehouse, sliding down until he hit the dirt. He pulled his knees to his chest, wrapping his arms around his head. He was shaking violently, his teeth chattering. "Get up," he told himself. "Get up, you coward." But he couldn't move. The panic was a physical weight, pressing the air from his lungs. He heard footsteps, soft, bare feet on stone. Eli? He didn't look up. He couldn't bear for anyone to see him like this. He felt a presence beside him. Then, arms went around him. Strong, warm arms. "Shh," the voice whispered. "It is just the night. It is just dark." It was Martha. She was wearing a simple cotton shift, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. She pulled him against her, rocking him slightly. I can't find him," Eli choked out. "He is gone," Martha whispered. "He is gone. Eli, you are here. Feel the stone, feel the cold. You are here." She held him while he wept. It was a shameful, ugly weeping, the kind that men hide deep inside their bellies until it rots them. But she did not pull away. She held him tighter, her hand stroking the back of his head, her fingers tangling in his sweat-damp hair. She murmured words he couldn't catch, soft sounds that had no meaning but comfort. She smelled of sage and wood smoke and skin. Slowly, the shaking subsided. The terror receded, leaving him exhausted and raw. He pulled back slightly, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked at her. In the moonlight, she looked younger. The lines of her face were smoothed by the silver light. Her eyes were dark pools of empathy. "I'm sorry," Eli whispered. "Do not apologize for bleeding," Martha said. She reached up and touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. Her touch was electric. It cut through the numbness of his grief. Eli looked at her lips. He saw the tremor there. He saw the woman who had been alone for 20 years. He saw the hunger that matched his own, not a hunger for pleasure, but a hunger to be held, to be known, to be alive. He leaned in. He kissed her. It was clumsy at first, raw and unsure. His lips were dry. Hers were soft. He tasted the salt of his own tears. Martha stiffened for a second, then she melted. She kissed him back, her mouth opening, her hand gripping the back of his neck with sudden, fierce strength. It was a collision of two broken things trying to make a whole. For a moment, the world fell away. There was only the heat of her skin, the taste of her breath, the desperate pressure of her body against his. Then, she pulled away. She shoved him back, gasping. Her hand went to her mouth. She stared at him, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "No," she whispered. "Martha." Eli reached for her. "Stop." She scrambled to her feet, backing away. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "I do not have time for this," she hissed. "I do not have time for boyish softness. I cannot be this." She looked at him with a mixture of desire and fury. "You are a distraction, Eli Vance. You are a weakness." She turned and ran. She did not walk. She ran back to the main house, the door slamming shut behind her, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silent canyon. Eli sat alone in the dirt, his heart hammering against his ribs, the taste of her still on his lips. He did not see her the next day. He worked on the fence until his hands were blistered. He avoided the eyes of the other women. He felt exposed, raw, as if his skin had been peeled back. Night fell, heavy and silent. Eli lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt her mouth on his. The door latch lifted. Eli held his breath. Martha stepped inside. She had locked the door behind her. She moved to the side of the bed. She was not wearing the shift now. She was wearing a long robe, tied loosely at the waist. She did not speak. She did not offer excuses or apologies. She looked at him with fierce determination. She untied the robe and let it fall to the floor. In the dim light, her body was a landscape of shadows and pale skin. She was not a young girl. She bore the marks of childbirth, of hard labor, of time. Her stomach was marked with silver lines. Her breasts were heavy, but she stood with a pride that took Eli's breath away. She was magnificent. She climbed into the bed. Eli reached for her, and this time, she did not pull away. She came to him with a hunger that frightened him. They made love in silence. It was not gentle. It was slow, aching, and intense. It was a reclaiming. Martha touched him as if she were memorizing the shape of his muscles, the texture of his scars. She guided his hands over her own body, demanding that he feel her, that he acknowledge her reality. For Eli, it was an anchor. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, grounding himself in the living warmth of her. He moved with her, the rhythm of their bodies driving away the ghosts of the war, the ghosts of the canyon. When she cried out, a low, guttural sound, he felt an answering sob in his own chest. They clung to each other, sweat slick and trembling, two survivors finding a moment of peace in the wreckage. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, the silence of the room heavy and comfortable. Eli traced the line of her spine with his fingertips. Martha lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "You should not be here," she whispered. "I am here," Eli said. "That is the problem," she said. She pushed herself up, sitting on the edge of the bed. She did not cover herself. She looked down at him, her face serious in the moonlight. "This changes things," she said. "It doesn't have to," Eli said. "It changes everything," Martha said sharply. "Before, you were a wounded bird I was nursing. Now you are a man in my bed." She stood up and reached for her robe. She tied it tight, armor going back on. "Listen to me, Eli. The world outside this canyon does not care about what happened here tonight. The world is fire and steel." She walked to the door, her hand resting on the latch. She did not look back at him. "If you stay, you do not just mend fences," she said. Her voice was cold, stripped of the intimacy they had just shared. "If you stay, you teach. You teach Fala. You teach others. You give them the skills you gave your brother." She paused. "And if you teach, you fight. When the time comes, and it always comes, you stand on the wall. You pull the trigger." She turned her head, looking at him over her shoulder. Her eyes were dry, hard flint. "If you fight, you bleed for them like I have. Do not think that because you have been inside me, you are safe. Desire has a cost, Eli, and the cost is blood." She opened the door. "Decide by sunrise," she said. She stepped out into the dark, leaving Eli alone in the cooling bed, the scent of her skin lingering in the air, the weight of her warning pressing down on his chest like a stone. The dust arrived before the rider did. It was a thin brown haze on the eastern horizon, marring the perfect clarity of the New Mexico morning. Eli stood at the edge of the cliff, his hand shielding his eyes, watching the speck that was Ruth grow larger as she navigated the treacherous switchbacks. Ruth was the settlement's best scout, a woman of 40 with skin like cured tobacco and eyes that missed nothing. She rode a sure-footed mule that picked its way up the rock face with the grace of a mountain goat. When she reached the plaza, she did not dismount immediately. She sat there, letting the mule breathe, her gaze sweeping over the women who had gathered. Martha stepped forward from the shade of the main house. She leaned on her cane, her face impassive. "Speak," Martha said. "They are coming," Ruth said. Her voice was dry, rasping with thirst. 3 days out, maybe 4 if the wind stays high." "How many?" Martha asked. 6 riders, Ruth replied. Heavily armed, they are moving slowly, checking the ground. They are not passing through. Matriarch, they are hunting. Eli felt a cold stone drop into the pit of his stomach. He knew who it was. Silas had not given up. The $500 was a siren song that would pull a man like that through the gates of hell itself. Are you sure they are coming here? Sarah asked, stepping up beside Martha. The desert is wide. Ruth spat into the dust. They found the waterhole at Willow Creek. They found the tracks from the storm last week. They are following the ghost of a trail, but they have a tracker who knows his business. He reads the sand like a preacher reads the Bible. All eyes turned to Eli. He stood apart, feeling the weight of their judgment. He was the rot that had brought the vultures. He was the reason the outside world was clawing its way up the cliff. Martha looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. Gather the council, she said. The council met in the cool, dim interior of the granary, the largest structure in the settlement. It was a circular room smelling of dried corn and dust. Martha sat in the center on a high-backed chair. Around her sat the elders, Sarah, Ruth, and Agnes. Agnes was the oldest, a woman withered by time but with a spirit as sharp and poisonous as a scorpion's tail. She had never looked at Eli with anything other than contempt. Eli stood near the door, his hat in his hands. We must close the trail, Agnes said, her voice shaking with anger. We roll the boulders. We seal the path. Let them ride by. They cannot climb sheer rock. They will not ride by, Eli said. Agnes snapped her head toward him. You have no voice here. Man, you brought this plague. I brought it, so I know it, Eli said, stepping into the light. His voice was steady. The man leading them is named Silas. He is not a soldier who follows orders. He is a wolf. If you block the trail, he will camp at the bottom. He will find the spring that feeds your cisterns. He will poison it or cut it off. Then he will wait. He has time. You have water for maybe 2 weeks. Agnes scoffed. We have hidden here for 20 years. We have survived droughts and soldiers. You survived because they did not know you were here. Eli countered. Silas knows. He smells blood. If you hide, you die. Then what do you suggest? Cowboy? Sarah asked, her arms crossed. We hit them before they reached the switchbacks, Eli said. The room went silent. We do not fight open battles, Agnes said. We are not an army. We are women protecting our home. You have to be an army now, Eli said. He looked at Martha. The terrain down there? In the box canyon 3 miles east. It is a funnel. If we catch them there, they have no cover. But we need riders. We need rifles on the ridge and riders on the floor to bait them in. Riders, Agnes spat. You want to put our daughters on horses to ride against killers? They are already killers, Eli said brutally. I have watched them train. They can shoot. They can ride. But they do not know how to fight as a unit. They fight like individuals. And you will teach them? Martha spoke for the first time. Her voice cut through the bickering. I can teach them, Eli said. I was a scout for the cavalry. I know how to set an ambush. I know how to turn a retreat into a trap. Agnes stood up, shaking a gnarled finger at Martha. This is madness. He wants to turn them into soldiers for his own war. He wants to use them as shields. He offers us a chance to strike first, Martha said. She looked at Agnes, then at Eli. If we hide, they starve us out, Martha said slowly. If we fight, we risk blood, but we choose the ground. She turned to Eli. Take who you need, but know this, Eli Vance. If one of them falls because of your command, do not come back up that trail. I understand, Eli said. Eli. The training began at dawn. Eli chose 4 girls. Fala was the first, her eagerness burning bright. Then there was Clara, a tall girl with broad shoulders who handled a rifle as if it were an extension of her arm. Then Ruth's daughter, May, who rode with a reckless sort of grace. And finally, a quiet girl named Esther who had eyes that seemed to look through things rather than at them. They met in the corral. The air was cold, the sun just painting the tops of the mesas in gold. Eli did not go easy on them. He could not afford to. "Mount up," he barked. They swung into their saddles. "We are not riding for pleasure today," Eli told them, pacing in front of the line. "You are not riding to get from here to there. You are riding to stay alive. When a man shoots at you, he shoots at the biggest target. That is the horse. If your horse goes down, you are dead. You have to be one thing with the animal. You have to move like water." He had them ride in a circle, tightening the loop until they were shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee. "Keep moving," Eli shouted. "If you stop, you are a target." He set up targets, straw stuffed into old sacks, at intervals around the perimeter of the flatland below the roost. He made them ride at a full gallop, firing their revolvers. At first, it was a disaster. The horses spooked at the gunfire. The shots went wild, kicking up dust 20 feet from the targets. Esther dropped her pistol in the sand and nearly fell trying to retrieve it. "Again," Eli yelled. "Pick it up! Again!" He saw the frustration on their faces. He saw the anger. Good. Anger was better than fear. Anger focused the mind. He rode beside Fala, his own bay gelding matching her paint pony stride for stride. "Don't look at the gun," he shouted over the wind. "Look at the sack. Your hand knows where to go. Trust your hand." She fired. The sand kicked up a yard to the left. "You are jerking the trigger," Eli shouted. "Squeeze it, like you are wringing out a wet cloth. Squeeze." They rode until the horses were lathered and blowing hard. They rode until the girls' hands were blistered and their faces were caked with dust. At midday, they stopped for water. The girls slumped against the fence, exhausted. Agnes watched from the plaza wall, her face a mask of disapproval. But Martha was there too. She stood in the shadow of the gate, watching Eli. She did not interfere. She let him drive them. In the afternoon, Eli switched to tactics. He drew lines in the dirt. "This is the canyon," he said. "This is the kill box. Clara, you and May are the hammer. You ride down from the ridge, loud, making noise. You want them to look at you." He looked at them sternly. "You do not engage. You fire high. You make them think you are panicking. You turn and run." "Run?" Clara asked, frowning. "We do not run. You run today so you can kill them tomorrow," Eli said sharply. "You pull them into the deep sand. That is where Fala and Esther wait. That is the anvil." He drilled it into them. The feint, the retreat, the ambush. He taught them signals. A whistle for advance. A raised hat to hold fire. By sunset, they were moving differently. They were no longer 4 girls on horses. They were beginning to look like a squad. Fala rode up to him as the light failed. She wiped sweat from her forehead. "Did we do well?" she asked. Eli looked at the targets. A few had holes in them now. "You stayed on the horses," he said. "That is a start." "It is not enough," Fala said. Her black eyes were fierce. "No," Eli said softly. "It ain't enough. But we have 2 more days." That night, Eli lay on his stomach in his tent, the muscles of his back knotting with tension. The training had taken a toll on his own healing body. His side throbbed with a dull, persistent rhythm. The flap of the tent lifted. Martha entered. She carried a small jar of salve. The scent of arnica and sage filled the small space. "Roll over," she commanded. Eli groaned but complied, shifting onto his side. Martha knelt beside him. Her hands were cool as she scooped out the salve and began to work it into the bruising around his old wound and the new aches in his shoulders. She did not speak at first. Her thumbs dug into the tight muscle, finding the knots and working them loose with a strength that made him gasp. "You push them hard," she said. "They have to be hard." Eli grunted. "Silas won't ask them if they are tired." "I know," Martha said. She moved her hands up his back, kneading the tension from his neck. Her touch shifted. It was no longer just medicinal. There was a heat to it, a lingering pressure. She leaned down, her breath warm against his ear. "And who pushes you?" "Eli Vance." He turned his head, catching her gaze. In the lantern light, her eyes were vast and dark. "You do," he whispered. Martha smiled, a rare, genuine thing that softened the years on her face. She leaned in and kissed him. It was not the desperate, frightened kiss of the first night. I was hungry. It was possessive. She pulled him up, her hands tangling in his hair. She kissed his throat. his chest, her mouth moving over the scars he carried from the war. She was tasting his history, accepting the violence that was written on his skin. She pushed him back onto the blankets and straddled him. She was a woman of earth and iron, heavy and real. There was no coyness in her, no hesitation. She took what she wanted, and she gave everything in return. Later, as the moon rose high and white over the canyon, they lay side by side, covered by a buffalo robe. The silence between them was easy now. "You never told me about him," Eli said quietly. "The husband?" Martha stared up at the canvas roof of the tent. "His name was Thomas," she said. Her voice was distant, traveling back across the decades. "He was a surveyor. He came to the reservation with the government men. He had kind eyes. Or so I thought." She shifted, her shoulder brushing Eli's. "I was 16. He bought me from my father for 2 horses and a crate of rifles. It was a good price. My father said—" Eli reached out and took her hand, her fingers interlaced with his. "Thomas was different from the other white men." She continued, "He did not beat me. He wanted to save me. That is what he called it. He taught me to speak English. He taught me to read the Bible. He made me wear dresses that scratched my skin and shoes that pinched my feet." She laughed, a bitter, short sound. "He thought that if he scrubbed me hard enough, the Indian would wash off. He thought he could make me into a proper wife." "And then?" Eli asked. "And then the boy was born. William. He looked like me. He had my skin. He had my hair. Thomas tried to love him, I think, but every time he looked at the boy, he saw the savage he was trying to forget." She squeezed Eli's hand until her knuckles turned white. "When the boy was 12, I came back from the river and the wagon was gone. Thomas was gone. He left a note on the table. He said he could not live in the wild anymore. He said he was going back to civilization. He left me in the cabin and the boy. He took the Bible. He left his own son," Eli asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "He left a half-breed," Martha said flatly. "That is what he saw. Not a son, a mistake." She turned to look at Eli. "That was the day I burned the dresses. That was the day I stopped trying to be saved. I took William and I walked into the mountains. I found this place. I made it a place where no one would ever have to be saved again." Eli looked at her. He saw the iron in her, but he also saw the fire that had forged it, the pain that fueled the fire. "Do you love me?" he asked. The question hung in the air, fragile and terrified. Martha looked at him for a long time. She did not look away. She did not soften. "Love," she said, testing the word as if it were a coin she suspected was counterfeit. "That is a white man's word. Eli, it is a word used to buy things. Thomas said he loved me." She sat up, the buffalo robe falling to her waist. She placed a hand on his chest, directly over his heart. "I have bled for you. Eli Vance, I dug lead out of your gut while you screamed. I have fed you from my own store. I have fought my own counsel to keep you here. And I have laid with you and let you see me as no one else has." She leaned down, her nose touching his. "If that ain't love, you tell me what is." Eli swallowed past the lump in his throat. He reached up and cupped her cheek. "It's love," he whispered. "It's the only kind that counts." Martha kissed him once, hard, on the lips. Then she settled back down beside him. "Then do not ask again," she said. "We do not have time for questions we already know the answers to." The next evening, after the training, Martha pulled Eli into the main house. She sat him down at the rough-hewn table and placed a bowl of stew in front of him. "Eat," she said. "Then we work." "Work?" Eli asked. "If you are to fight with us, you must speak with us," she said. "The girls, in the heat of battle, they will revert to their mother tongue. If you do not understand them, you are useless." She began to teach him. It was not English. It was the language of her people, the language she had been forbidden to speak in Thomas's house. "Two," she said, pointing to the water pitcher. "Two," Eli repeated. "Coo," she said, touching the fire. "Coo." It was slow work. The sounds were strange in Eli's mouth, guttural and tonal, demanding a different way of using his throat. But he learned. He had a good ear, honed by years of listening to the wind and the silence. They sat late into the night, the lamp burning low. Martha was patient in a way she rarely showed. She corrected his pronunciation, her fingers touching his lips to shape the sounds. "Why?" Eli asked during a pause. "Why teach me this?" "Because it is mine," she said simply, "and if you are to stay, you must carry part of it." It was an intimacy deeper than the act of love-making. She was giving him the keys to her world. She was letting him into the history she had protected so fiercely. But outside the walls of the main house, the settlement was fracturing. Agnes had not been idle. She sat by the communal fire in the plaza, speaking in low, urgent tones to the other women. "He has bewitched her," Agnes hissed. "The matriarch has lost her mind. She lets a man into her bed, and now she lets him lead our daughters into death. He is trying to save us," Ruth said, though her voice lacked conviction. "He is saving himself," Agnes snapped. "He is using us as a shield against his enemies. When the shooting starts, do you think he will stay? He will ride. He will leave us to die. Just like the husband left her." The women listened. Fear is a powerful seed, and Agnes watered it with history. They looked at the main house, where the light burned late. They saw the shadow of the cowboy and the matriarch on the window shade, and they felt a crack forming in the foundation of their world. The confrontation happened on the morning of the third day. Eli was saddling his horse, preparing for the final training session. The girls were gathering, checking their cinches. Agnes marched into the corral, followed by 6 other women. They carried hoes and pitchforks, makeshift weapons held with grim determination. "Stop," Agnes commanded. Fala looked at Eli, uncertain. "Get down from those horses," Agnes said to the girls. "You will not ride today." "Agnes," Eli said, stepping forward. "We don't have time for this. The scout said 3 days. Today is the 3rd day. I am not speaking to you." "Wolf," Agnes spat. She looked at Fala. "Get down. Child, do not follow this man to your grave." Martha appeared at the edge of the plaza. She walked slowly, her cane tapping rhythmically on the stone. "What is this?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the silence. "It is an end to madness," Agnes said, turning to face her. "You have betrayed us. Martha, you have brought a viper into our nest. You sleep with him. You whisper with him. You have forgotten who we are." "I have forgotten nothing," Martha said. Her face was cold stone. "You have broken the law," Agnes shouted. "No men. That was the covenant. No men in the roost." "The law is for our protection," Martha said. "And right now, he is our protection. He is the danger." Agnes screamed. She pointed a shaking finger at the girls on the horses. "Look at them. They are not warriors. They are children. You are sending them to die for his bounty. I am sending them to fight for their home." Martha said, "I will not let them go," Agnes said. She stepped in front of Fala's horse, grabbing the bridle. Fala's horse pinned its ears and danced sideways. "Let go!" "Agnes," Eli said warningly. "You stay back." Agnes swung the hoe at Eli. It was a clumsy blow, but the heavy iron head caught him on the shoulder, reopening the bruise there. Eli stumbled back. "Stop!" Martha roared. The plaza froze. Agnes stood panting, the hoe raised. "You strike a guest?" Martha asked, her voice trembling with rage. "You strike a man who has worked our fences and shod our horses? I strike an enemy," Agnes said. "And if you stand with him, you are an enemy too." The settlement hung in the balance. Eli saw the division in the faces of the women. Some looked at Martha with loyalty, others with doubt. Agnes had struck a nerve. The fear of the outsider was deep. "Fine," Martha said. She stepped forward, standing between Eli and the mob. "If you want to hide, Agnes, then hide. Go to your root cellars. Bury your heads in the sand." She looked up at Fala and the other riders. "But those who want to live, those who want to make sure that no man ever takes what is ours again, they ride with me." Martha turned to the tack shed. She emerged a moment later carrying a rifle, a Winchester repeater that looked well-oiled and deadly in her hands. She walked to the spare mule, a large, intelligent beast named Goliath. She grabbed the pommel and, with a grunt of effort, pulled herself into the saddle. She looked down at the assembly. "I am riding to the Box Canyon," she said. "Eli Vance rides with me. Who else?" Fala did not hesitate. She kicked her horse forward to stand beside Martha. Ruth's daughter, May, followed, then Clara, then Esther. Ruth looked at Agnes, then at her daughter. She sighed, walked to her own mule, and mounted up. Agnes stood alone with her followers. Her face was twisted with bitterness. "You go to your death," she hissed. Martha said, "Better than waiting for it to knock on the door." She signaled to Eli. "Lead the way. Scout." Eli mounted his horse. He looked at Martha, sitting tall on the mule, the rifle across her lap. He felt a surge of something that went beyond respect. It was a fierce, burning pride. He turned his horse toward the trail. "Move out!" he shouted. The small column of riders clattered out of the plaza, leaving the safety of the cliff behind, descending into the shadow of the canyon where the enemy waited. The wind changed direction an hour before sunset, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and unwashed men. It was a smell Eli knew better than the back of his own hand. It was the smell of a camp that did not care who found it. They had stopped in a narrow spur of the canyon, a mile short of the killing ground Eli had chosen. Ruth, who had ridden ahead on her sure-footed mule, came scrambling back down the scree slope, her face pale beneath the layer of red dust. "They are not 3 days out," she hissed, sliding to a halt beside Martha's stirrup. "They are here." "Where?" Martha demanded, her grip tightening on the Winchester. "Half a mile east," Ruth said. "They cut the switchback. They found the old goat trail we thought was washed out. They are watering their horses at the blind spring." "How many?" Eli asked. 6, Ruth said. "Big men, heavily armed. And they have found the marker." The blood drained from Martha's face. The marker was a stack of stones, innocent to the untrained eye, but to those who knew, it pointed the way to the hidden entrance of the lower canyon. "They know," Martha whispered. "They know we are close." The settlement was thrown into a quiet, terrified chaos. The element of surprise, the anvil and the hammer Eli had planned, was gone. They were not hunting the hunters anymore. They were the ones being cornered. Martha turned in her saddle, her eyes scanning the small group of riders. Fala looked terrified, her knuckles white on the reins. Clara and May were grim, jaws set. "Agnes," Martha said sharply. Agnes rode forward. Her anger from the morning had cooled into a hard, brittle fear. "Take the young ones," Martha commanded. "Take the girls who cannot shoot. Take the babies. Go to the deep caves in the north wall. Do not light a fire. Do not speak. Do not come out until I come for you. And if you do not come," Agnes asked, her voice trembling, "then you stay there until the water runs out, or you walk into the desert and take your chances with the ghosts." Martha said, "But you do not let them take the children." Agnes looked at Martha, and for the first time in years, the bitterness was gone, replaced by a shared, desperate understanding. She nodded once, turned her mule, and began barking orders to the women who had followed them down. Eli watched them go, a silent procession of shadows disappearing into the labyrinth of rock. He felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. "We have to hold the ridge," Eli said to Martha. "If they get past the spur, they have a straight shot at the roost." Martha looked at the sun, which was bleeding red against the canyon rim. "We dig in," she said. "We fight them on the rocks." Night fell like a shroud. They made no fires. The cold was a physical thing, seeping into their bones, but no one complained. They positioned themselves among the boulders overlooking the narrow pass where the hunters would have to ride. Eli lay on his belly behind a slab of sandstone, his rifle propped on a saddlebag. Martha was beside him. The girls, Fala, Clara, May, Esther, and Ruth, were spread out along the line, huddled under blankets, weapons clutched to their chests. It was a long wait. The canyon echoed with the sounds of the desert, the hoot of an owl, the scuttle of a scorpion, the wind moaning through the flutes of stone. "You should have gone with Agnes," Martha whispered. Eli checked the action of his rifle, the metallic click loud in the silence. "I am where I belong," he said. "You are a fool," she said, but there was no heat in it. "You could have slipped away in the confusion. You could be halfway to Mexico by now." "And leave you to Silas?" Eli asked. I would rather die. Martha shifted, moving closer to him until their shoulders touched. The warmth of her body was the only comfort in the vast, dark world. You are mine. Eli Vance, she said softly. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, like saying the sky was blue or the rock was hard. I am yours, Eli agreed. She turned to him. In the starlight, her eyes were fierce, burning with a light that defied the darkness. Then prove it, she whispered. She pulled him back from the edge of the ridge, into the deep shadow of an overhang. The others were asleep or keeping watch 50 yards away. They were alone in the dark pocket of stone. Martha kissed him. It was not gentle. It was a collision. She tasted of dust and fear and a ferocious will to live. Her hands tore at his shirt, seeking skin. She needed to feel him, to know that he was warm and breathing and real before the dawn brought death. Eli met her desperation with his own. They moved together with a frantic urgency. Fumbling with buttons and buckles, there was no romance in it, only the raw, driving need to affirm life in the face of its end. She straddled him, pressing him into the sandy floor of the cave. She moved against him, a hard, rhythmic friction that chased away the cold. She did not close her eyes. She watched him, memorizing his face, the way his breath hitched, the way his hands gripped her hips. When the end came, it was a shuddering release that felt like a sob. Martha buried her face in the crook of his neck. Her teeth grazed his skin. And then, sharply, she bit him. Eli gasped, the pain sharp and sudden. She held on, her jaw tight, tasting the copper tang of his blood. She marked him. She put her seal on him. She pulled back, breathing heavily. A small drop of blood welled on his shoulder. She wiped it away with her thumb and brought it to her lips. Now you carry me, she whispered. Whatever happens tomorrow, you carry me. Eli reached up and pulled her down to him, holding her tightly as the wind howled outside, waiting for the sun to rise on the day of reckoning. Dawn broke with a deceptive peace. The sky turned a pale, robin-egg blue, and the birds began to sing in the scrub brush. Then the shooting started. It began with a single crack, sharp as a whip, followed instantly by the whine of a ricochet off the rock face a foot from Clara's head. They see us, Clara screamed, scrambling back. Keep your heads down, Eli roared, rolling into position. Below them, the canyon floor was a maze of shadows. Muzzle flashes bloomed like angry flowers from behind the scrub oak and boulders. The hunters were good. They had moved up in the dark, using the noise of the wind to mask their approach. They were pinned down. Eli sighted down the barrel of his Henry rifle. He saw a hat brims poke out from behind a rock. He fired, dust kicked up, and the hat disappeared. Hold your fire until you have a target, he shouted to the girls. Don't waste ammunition. The return fire was withering. Bullets chipped away the sandstone in front of them, sending stinging shards of rock into their faces. The boom of heavy buffalo guns echoed off the walls, deafening and terrifying. They are moving up the left flank, Ruth yelled from her position. Eli looked. 2 men were dashing from cover to cover, moving up the scree slope, trying to get an angle on their line. Fala! Esther! Eli shouted. Suppress them! The 2 girls popped up. They fired wildly, their fear making them rush, but the volume of fire forced the 2 men to dive behind a fallen log. Eli saw his chance. He slid backward, crawling on his elbows until he reached a fissure in the rock. He dropped down, sliding 10 feet to a lower ledge. From here, he had a clear view of the log. He took a breath, steadying his hands. The pain in his gut was a distant memory. There was only the target. One of the men behind the log raised his head to fire. Eli squeezed the trigger. The man jerked back as if kicked by a mule. He tumbled backward, sliding down the slope, his rifle clattering against the stones. 1 down. Eli whispered. Then a voice called out from the canyon floor, a voice that froze the blood in Eli's veins. Eli, is that you, boy? Eli pressed himself against the rock. He knew that voice. It was raspy, full of gravel and bad whiskey. Come on out, Eli, shouted the voice. It was Jebediah Smith. They had ridden together for 3 years. They had shared blankets. They had saved each other's lives in the Kansas mud. "Don't die for a bunch of squaws." "Eli," Jeb yelled, "Silas just wants the bounty. You walk down here and we split it. We can ride to Mexico, drink tequila till we drop, just like old times." Eli closed his eyes. He saw Jeb's face, grinning, missing a front tooth, handing him a canteen of water when he was feverish. "Eli!" Martha called out from the ridge above. "Do not listen. I heard him." Eli shouted back. He leaned around the rock. "Go home, Jeb!" Eli yelled. "There is nothing for you here but a shallow grave." Jeb laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "You always were soft. Eli, soft heart gets you killed." A bullet smashed into the rock inches from Eli's face, spraying him with dust. Jeb had seen him. Eli pulled back, his heart hammering. He was not soft, not anymore. Martha had burned the softness out of him. He looked up. The second man on the flank was moving again, trying to get higher. If he reached the overhang, he could drop dynamite on the girls. Eli had to move. He scrambled up the fissure, his boots slipping on the loose shale. He vaulted over the lip of the ledge just as Jeb fired again. The bullet tugged at his sleeve, burning the skin. Eli rolled, coming up on one knee. He saw Jeb clearly now. He was standing behind a boulder, reloading his Spencer carbine. He looked older, heavier, but it was Jeb. Jeb looked up. Their eyes locked across 50 yards of empty air. Jeb grinned. "Gotcha," he mouthed. He snapped the lever of his rifle shut. Eli didn't think. He didn't remember the whiskey or the blankets. He remembered the bite on his shoulder. He remembered Martha's weight on him. He remembered the girls shaking with fear behind the rocks. He fired. The bullet hit Jeb in the center of the chest. The grin vanished. Jeb looked down at the red blossom spreading on his duster. He looked back at Eli, a look of profound confusion on his face. Then his knees buckled, and he fell face forward into the dust. Eli chambered another round, his hands steady, his soul numb. "Right flank," Martha screamed. Eli spun around. The battle had shifted. While he was dealing with Jeb, 2 other hunters had pushed up the center. They were pinned down by Clara and May, but they were returning heavy fire. Suddenly, Fala stood up. She had jammed her rifle. She was tugging at the lever, panic written all over her face. She was exposed. "Fala! Get down!" Eli screamed. One of the hunters, a man with a long black beard, saw her. He raised his rifle. Esther saw it too. The quiet girl, the one who looked through things, didn't hesitate. She launched herself from her cover, tackling Fala. The rifle cracked. Esther's body jerked violently in midair. She hit the ground on top of Fala, a spray of bright red blood painting the sandstone. "No!" Fala screamed, scrambling out from under the weight. Esther lay still, clutching her neck. Blood pumped between her fingers in a terrifying rhythm. "Cover me!" Eli roared. He dropped his rifle and ran. He ran through the open ground, bullets kicking up dust around his boots. He didn't weave. He didn't duck. He ran straight to the girls. He grabbed Esther by the back of her vest. She was small, light as a bird. He heaved her up, throwing her over his shoulder. "Move!" he yelled at Fala, grabbing her arm and shoving her toward the higher rocks. They scrambled back, lungs burning, legs pumping. Martha and the others laid down a wall of fire, their rifles smoking, buying them the seconds they needed. Eli dove behind the main barricade, Esther's body hitting the ground with a wet thud. He rolled her over. The bullet had grazed the jugular, tearing a jagged furrow through the muscle of her neck. It was bad. Martha was there instantly. She dropped her rifle and fell to her knees. "Hold her head," she commanded. Eli pinned Esther's shoulders. The girl's eyes were wide, staring at the sky, full of a terrible surprise. Martha ripped the scarf from her neck. She didn't use it to bandage. She pulled a knife from her belt, a heavy Bowie knife she had taken from a dead soldier years ago. She thrust the blade into the small fire they had kept smoldering in a deeper crevice for reloading. She held it there until the steel turned a dull, angry red. "Don't look," Eli whispered to Fala, who was sobbing beside them. Martha didn't hesitate. She couldn't. She pressed the hot steel against the wound. The sound of sizzling flesh filled the small space. The smell of burning meat was acrid and horrifying. Esther tried to scream, but it came out as a gurgling choke. Her body arched off the ground, fighting Eli's grip with maniacal strength. Then she went limp, passed out from the pain. Martha pulled the knife away. The bleeding had stopped, replaced by a black, ugly scab. Martha dropped the knife. Her hands, which had been steady as stone, began to shake. She looked at Esther's pale face, then at Fala, who was curled in a ball, covered in her friend's blood. Tears, silent and hot, tracked through the dust on Martha's face. She wept without sound, her mouth open in a silent keen of grief. She had promised to keep them safe. She had promised. From the canyon floor, a voice drifted up. It was Silas. "That's enough for today," he shouted. His voice was calm, terrifyingly so. "We are pulling back. But we ain't leaving, you hear me, Matriarch? We know where you are now." Eli crawled to the edge and looked over. The hunters were retreating, dragging Jeb's body and another wounded man. They were mounting up, riding back toward the waterhole. "Bring your friends," Martha shouted back, her voice cracking but loud. "We have plenty of graves." Silas laughed. It echoed off the canyon walls. "You can't stay awake forever," he called. "We will be back, and next time, we bring fire." The riders turned and disappeared around the bend of the canyon. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. Eli sat back against the rock, his chest heaving. He looked at his shoulder. The bite mark was throbbing, a ring of bruised purples and reds. He looked at Martha. She was wiping her face with her sleeve, smearing the tears and the dust into mud. She checked Esther's pulse. It was weak, but it was there. "She is alive," Martha whispered. "For now," Eli said. He looked around at the girls. They were shell-shocked. Clara was staring at her hands. May was vomiting quietly in the corner. Fala was holding Esther's hand, rocking back and forth. They were not soldiers. They were children who had been forced to play a game with lethal stakes. Martha stood up. She used her rifle as a crutch. She looked old. The battle had aged her 10 years in an hour. "We cannot stay here," she said. She looked at the roost, visible in the distance, clinging to the cliff. It looked fragile now. A bird's nest in the path of a storm. "They know the way," she said. "They will bring more men. They will bring dynamite. They will bring the law." "What do we do?" Eli asked. Martha looked at him. Her eyes were dry now. The iron was back, but it was brittle. "We have two choices," she said. "We run, we pack what we can carry, take the secret trails north into the mountains, and try to find a new hole to hide in. We become refugees again." "And the other choice?" Eli asked. Martha looked toward the canyon mouth where Silas had vanished. "We go down there," she said quietly. "We will go down there tonight, and we kill them all, every last one of them. We do not wait for the fire, we bring it to them." She looked at the girls. "But if we do that, we lose ourselves. We become just like them." She turned to Eli. "Help me carry her," she said, gesturing to Esther. "We have to get her to the spring." Eli lifted the unconscious girl. She was impossibly light. As they began the slow, painful trek back up the ridge, Eli knew that the time for teaching was over. The time for hiding was over. The world had found them, and it demanded a price in blood. He looked at Martha's back as she limped ahead of him. He knew he would pay for it. He would pay any price she asked. They walked into the rising sun, leaving the dead man and the lost innocents behind them in the dust. The silence that fell over the roost was heavier than the granite boulders anchoring it to the cliff. It was the silence of a held breath, the suspended moment before a dam breaks. The women moved like ghosts through the familiar pathways of their home, touching adobe walls and wooden beams with lingering fingers. They were not just packing, they were mourning. In the main house, the map was spread across the rough-hewn table. It was a faded thing, drawn on deer hide with charcoal and berry juice, the lines blurred by time. Martha stared at it, her hands gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned the color of an old bone. "We cannot stay," Eli said. He stood on the other side of the table, watching her. His voice was low, stripped of any false hope. Silas will return. He will bring men with dynamite. He will bring men who do not care about bounties, but only about burning. If we stay, we die, and the memory of this place dies with us. Martha did not look up. "This is my blood," she whispered. "Every stone here I carried, every timber I cut. My son is buried at the gate. You ask me to leave him to the boots of men like Silas. I ask you to carry him with you," Eli said. He reached across the map, his finger tracing a line through the jagged peaks to the north. "There is a valley," Eli said, "high up, past the timberline where the air is thin. The Spanish called it Valle de la Luna. It is hard to reach. The trails are goat paths. A wagon cannot pass, but there is water. There is a game, and there is only one way in. A bottleneck narrow enough for 2 rifles to hold off an army." Martha looked at where his finger rested. Her eyes widened slightly. "William spoke of this place," she said softly. "A year before the soldiers came. He went north, looking for elk. He came back with eyes full of sky. He said he found a meadow where the grass grew to a horse's belly. He said he wanted to build a cabin there one day. When the world got too loud, it is a good place," Eli said. "I rode near it once, during the war. It is invisible from the canyon floor. We can disappear there." Martha looked around the room. The fire was dying in the hearth. The shadows were stretching long and dark. "To leave is to admit fear," she said. "To leave is to choose life," Eli countered. He walked around the table and stood beside her. He did not touch her, but his presence was a warm weight against her side. "You built this place to keep them safe. The walls don't matter. Martha, the stone doesn't matter. They are the fortress. The girls, Agnes, Ruth, you. If you stay here and burn, the fortress falls. If you move, the fortress just changes ground." Martha closed her eyes. She let out a breath that sounded like a structural beam snapping. "We move at night," she said. The preparation was frantic and silent. They took only what the mules could carry: food, ammunition, blankets, the heavy looms, the furniture, the books. All were left behind. Martha walked through the settlement one last time. She stopped at the pile of stones near the gate, the cairn that marked her son's grave. She did not weep. She knelt and took a single stone, a smooth piece of river quartz, and placed it in her pocket. "I am not leaving you," she whispered to the dust. "I am taking the part of you that matters." She found Eli in the stable, checking the cinches on the pack mules. He looked tired. The bandage on his shoulder where she had bitten him was stained with fresh sweat. "Are they ready?" she asked. "They are scared," Eli said. "But they are ready." Martha looked at him. In the dim light of the stable lantern, he looked ragged. His face was lined with the same exhaustion she felt in her own marrow. But he was standing. He was loading the mules. He was checking the rifles. She walked to him. She placed her hands on his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart beneath the cotton shirt. "You are asking them to walk into hell," she said. "The old trails. There is no water for 30 miles. The heat will kill the weak. The snakes will take the careless." "I know," Eli said. "Then why?" she asked. "Why do you think we can make it?" "Because you are leading them," Eli said. He looked down at her, his eyes searching her face. "I see you, Martha," he said. "I don't see a broken woman. I don't see a victim. I see the iron. I see the mother who stood at the gate with a rifle. I see the warrior who cut a bullet out of a stranger. I see the woman who took me into her bed and marked me as her own." He leaned his forehead against hers. "You are whole," he whispered. "You are the spine of this family. If you walk, they will walk. If you climb, they will climb." Martha breathed in his scent, leather, horse, and man. It grounded her. "Then we walk," she said. The journey began under the cover of a moonless night. The column of women, children, and animals moved like a single, serpentine organism out of the roost and onto the treacherous switchbacks leading north. For 3 nights, they moved through a nightmare of stone and shadow. The terrain was unforgiving. The old Spanish trail was little more than a rumor of a path, eroded by wind and time. It skirted the edges of sheer drops where a single misstep meant a 1,000-foot fall into darkness. They slept during the day, huddling under overhangs or stringing blankets between boulders to create meager shade. The heat was a hammer, even in the shadows. The temperature hovered near 100 degrees. The water in the skins grew hot and tasted of canvas and stagnation. Agnes struggled. Her joints were stiff with age, and by the second night, she was stumbling. Eli gave her his horse, walking beside her, guiding the animal over the loose shale. He did not speak, but every time she swayed, his hand was there on her arm, steadying her. On the fourth night, the water ran low. The children were crying, a dry, rasping sound that tore at Martha's heart. Their lips were cracked, their eyes were sunken. "We have to keep moving," Eli urged, his own voice a croak. "The river is at the bottom of the canyon bottom. 10 miles. They pushed on. The moon rose, casting the landscape in a spectral silver light that made the cactus look like twisted men. A cry rang out from the rear of the column. "Snake!" Eli ran back. A young girl named Sarah stood frozen, staring at the ground. A rattlesnake, thick as a man's arm, was coiled in the center of the path, its tail buzzing a warning that vibrated in the air. "Don't move," Eli commanded softly. He drew his revolver. The shot would echo, maybe alerting anyone miles away. But he couldn't risk the bite. He aimed. The hammer clicked back. The snake struck. Not at the girl, but at the mule beside her. The mule panicked, rearing up and lashing out with its hooves. The pack saddle slipped. The mule danced near the edge of the trail. "Whoa!" Eli shouted, holstering the gun and lunging for the lead rope. He caught the animal just as its hind legs slipped over the rim. He dug his boots into the gravel, his muscles screaming as he threw his weight backward. The mule scrabbled, finding purchase, and lunged forward. Safe, the snake slithered away into the brush. Martha was there a second later. "Is she bit?" "No," Eli said, dusting off his hands. "Just scared." He looked at the girl. Sarah. She was trembling violently. He knelt in front of her. "It's gone. Sarah," he said gently. "You're all right. Look at me. You're all right." He took his canteen, his own ration, which he had barely touched, and held it to her lips. "Drink," he said. Martha watched him. She saw the way he gave up his water without hesitation. She saw the way he calmed the animal and the child. He was not acting like a hired gun. He was acting like a father. They reached the river just before dawn on the 5th day. It was the Pecos, running high with snowmelt from the distant peaks. The water was churning, brown and angry, cutting through the canyon with the force of a freight train. "We have to cross," Eli shouted over the roar of the water. "The trail picks up on the other side. This side is a dead end." "It looks too deep," Ruth yelled. "It's manageable if we link up," Eli said. "Put the strongest upstream to break the current. Put the children and the elders in the middle." They formed a chain, arms locked, moving slowly into the freezing water. The shock of the cold was agonizing after the days of heat. The current pulled at their legs, trying to sweep them away. Martha was in the center, holding Agnes on one side and Fala on the other. Eli was at the head of the line, taking the full brunt of the river, breaking the flow with his body. They were halfway across when it happened. A submerged log, tumbling in the current, struck the middle of the line. The impact broke the chain. 3 girls were swept downstream. 2 managed to grab onto boulders, but the third, a slight girl named Rose, no older than 12, was caught in the main channel. "Rose!" Martha screamed. Before the sound had left her throat, Eli had let go of the line. He didn't try to wade. He dove. He disappeared into the brown churn. Martha stood frozen in the rushing water, her heart hammering against her ribs. Seconds ticked by. Long, agonizing seconds. "He is gone," Agnes wailed. Then, 20 yards downstream, a head broke the surface. Eli. He had Rose in one arm, swimming with a powerful side stroke against the current. He wasn't fighting the river. He was angling across it, using the force of the water to push him toward the bank. He slammed into a sandbar, driving his feet into the mud. He dragged Rose up onto the dry ground. She was coughing, spitting up water, but she was moving. Eli collapsed beside her, his chest heaving. Martha waded the rest of the way, ignoring the burning in her lungs. She scrambled up the bank and ran to them. Rose looked up, eyes wide with terror and awe. "He caught me! Matriarch! He caught me!" Martha looked at Eli. He was lying on his back, staring at the sky, gasping for air. He was soaked, shivering, and exhausted. She dropped to her knees beside him. She didn't speak. She placed her hand on his cheek. He turned his head and looked at her. His eyes were clear. "I told you," he wheezed. "The fortress doesn't fall." In that moment, the last vestige of doubt in Martha's heart evaporated. He was not a guest. He was not a temporary ally. He was blood. The climb out of the canyon took another 2 days, but the air changed. It became cooler, thinner, sweeter. The scent of sage gave way to the smell of pine resin and damp earth. They crested the final ridge at noon on the 7th day. Below them lay the valley. It was exactly as William had described. A bowl of emerald green tucked between the granite peaks, sheltered from the wind. A stream wound through the center like a silver ribbon. Stands of aspen and spruce ringed the meadow. It was a place of profound peace. The women stood silent on the ridge, staring down. After the dust and the heat and the fear, the green hurt their eyes. Eli walked beside Martha. "Look," he said, pointing to a cluster of trees near the stream. Martha squinted. There, half hidden by the overgrowth, was a lean-to made of fallen timber, and beside it, a ring of stones for a fire. She walked down the slope, her cane sinking into the soft grass. She moved faster, ignoring the ache in her bad leg. She reached the camp. The wood was rotted, reclaimed by the earth. But carved into the trunk of a massive aspen tree were initials W.V., William Vance, and below it, a date, 1878. "He was here," Martha whispered. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she traced the carving. He was really here. The grief hit her then, not as a sharp blow, but as a rising tide. She sank to her knees at the base of the tree. The sobs came from the bottom of her soul, tearing through the armor she had worn for 20 years. She wept for the boy who had carved his name and then gone home to die. She wept for the home she had left behind. She wept for the sheer, exhausting weight of survival. Eli did not try to stop her. He stood guard a few feet away, letting her break. He knew that a bone had to be reset before it could heal, and a soul had to empty itself of grief before it could fill with hope. That evening, while the others set up a temporary camp in the meadow, Eli found Martha sitting by the river. She had washed her face, scrubbing away the tear tracks and the trail dust. He sat beside her on the bank. The water was clear here, tumbling over smooth stones. "Come with me," he said gently. He stood and offered her his hand. She took it. He led her into the shallows. The water was cold, biting at their ankles, but it felt clean. It felt like a baptism. Eli turned to her. He began to unbutton her shirt. Martha did not pull away. She stood still, letting him strip the dirty, sweat-stiffened clothes from her body. When she was naked, standing in the dappled sunlight of the late afternoon, she felt a strange sense of newness. Eli stripped off his own clothes and tossed them onto the bank. He was bruised, scarred, lean muscle and hard bone. He pulled her into the water, down until they were kneeling in the current. He took a handful of river sand and gently began to scrub her back, her arms, her legs. He washed away the desert. He washed away the fear. "Thank you," he murmured against her neck. "For what?" Martha asked, her voice husky. "For choosing life," Eli said. "For walking when you wanted to lay down. For bringing them here." He turned her around and kissed her. It was slow, deep, and filled with a reverence that made her throat tight. They made love right there in the shallows, with the water rushing around their waists. It was not the frantic, desperate coupling of the night before the battle. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was an affirmation. Eli moved inside her, and Martha felt the last of the ice in her heart melt. She wrapped her legs around him, pulling him closer, anchoring him to her as the river tried to push them apart. "I am here," she whispered. "I am here." Afterward, they sat in the water, holding each other as the sun dipped below the peaks, turning the sky a bruised purple. Martha looked at him. His wet hair was plastered to his forehead. He looked younger, softer. "You cannot leave," she said. Eli looked at the water. "I wasn't planning on it." "No," Martha said. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I mean, you cannot be just a drifter who stayed. You cannot be a guest." "I don't want to be a guest," Eli said. "Then what do you want?" "I want to be the man who stands beside you," Eli said. "Not in front of you, not behind you, beside you." Martha nodded slowly. "Then stay," she said. "But not as my pet, and not as a white savior who led the poor women to safety. You stay as a man. You stay as a teacher." She looked toward the camp, where the smoke of the cooking fires was beginning to rise. "We have to build this place from the dirt up," she said. "We need shelters before the winter comes. We need to hunt, and we need to train." "Train?" Eli asked. "Yes," Martha said. Her eyes were clear and sharp. "Silas may not find us here, but the world is small. Someone will always come, and next time my daughters will not just survive. They will rule this valley." She kissed his palm. "But we will teach them something else, too," she said. "What?" "We will teach them that they do not have to be alone to be strong," she said. "We will teach them that love does not always mean loss." She stood up, the water cascading off her body. She reached down and pulled Eli up. "Come, Eli Vance, we have a home to build." The next morning, the sound of an axe ringing against wood echoed through the valley. Eli stood by a fallen spruce, stripping the bark with a draw knife. He was shirtless, sweat gleaming on his back. Around him, the girls were working. Fala was dragging branches for roofing. Clara was digging post holes. Even Agnes was sitting by the fire, weaving grass mats for the floors. Martha stood by the river, watching them. She held the map, the old map her son had drawn, in her hands. She struck a match on a stone and held the flame to the corner of the deer hide. She watched it burn. She watched the old lines, the old paths, the old grief turn to ash and drift away on the wind. She walked up the slope to where Eli was working. He stopped when he saw her. He leaned on the axe handle, wiping his brow. "Matriarch," he said, a smile touching the corner of his mouth. Martha picked up a second axe that was leaning against the stump. She tested the edge with her thumb. It was sharp. She stepped up beside him, facing the timber. "Show me the cut," she said. Eli grinned. He pointed to the notch he had started. "Right there," he said. "Swing through with your hips." Martha swung. The axe bit deep into the wood. A solid, satisfying thud. "Again," Eli said. They worked together, their rhythm finding a syncopation. Thud, thud, thud. That sounded like a heartbeat. It was the sound of the past dying, and the sound of the future taking root in the high, green silence of the valley. The golden aspen leaves of the high valley had begun to fall, carpeting the earth in a layer of trembling yellow coins. It had been 3 months since they arrived in the Valle de la Luna. 3 months of peace, 3 months of building cabins from spruce logs and mud, of hunting elk in the high meadows, of watching the girls turn brown and strong in the mountain sun. But peace in the territories was a borrowed thing, a debt that eventually had to be paid. It was Ruth who brought the news. She had been patrolling the lower pass, the single choke point where the goat trail widened enough for a horse to stand. She rode her mule into the camp at a gallop, something she never did. Her face was gray beneath her tan. "They are here," she said, sliding from the saddle before the mule had fully stopped. "How many?" Eli asked. He was sharpening an axe by the fire. He stood up, the stones scraping against the steel with a sound like a shriek. Ruth took a breath. "It is not just the bounty hunters. It is a posse, maybe 20 men. They have pack horses. They have dynamite. They are not moving like trackers this time. They are moving like an invasion." Martha walked out of the main cabin. She wore a dress of dark buckskin she had sewn herself, fitted for riding and fighting. She looked at Ruth, then at Eli. Silas brought friends. Eli said quietly. He couldn't take us alone, so he sold the location to a gang, likely promised them the women and the horses. The camp went silent. The younger girls looked at the matriarch, their eyes wide. They remembered the terror of the canyon. They remembered the flight through the desert. "We can pack," Agnes said, her voice trembling. "There is a trail over the northern ridge. It is steep, but we can make it." "No," Martha said. Her voice was not loud, but it stopped the wind. "We ran from the roost," she said. "We ran across the burning sands. We crossed the river. We climbed the mountain. I am done running." She walked to the center of the clearing. She looked at the cabins they had built. She looked at the smokehouse full of curing venison. She looked at the grave marker Eli had carved for William, placed under the great aspen tree. "This is not a hiding place anymore," she said. "This is our home, and if they want it, they will have to pay for it in blood." She turned to Eli. "Can we hold them?" Eli looked at the entrance to the valley. It was a narrow funnel of granite, steep walls rising 500 feet on either side. The trail was loose shale, treacherous and exposed. "We have the high ground," Eli said. "We have a bottleneck, but 20 men, if they rush us, they can overwhelm the line." "Then we do not let them rush," Martha said. "We bleed them before they even see us. They spent the night working by moonlight. There was no sleep. Fear was a fuel that burned hot and fast, driving them to dig, to stack, to sharpen." Eli took Fala and Clara to the narrows. They dug pits in the soft sand of the trail, covering them with woven mats of grass and dust. At the bottom of the pits, they placed sharpened stakes of fire-hardened pine. They piled boulders on the rim of the canyon, propping them up with logs tied to tripwires. They strung ropes across the trail at neck height, camouflaged with dirt and grease. It was brutal work. It was the work of war. Eli taught them as they worked. "Do not dig it too deep," he told Fala as she shoveled. "Just deep enough to break a leg. A dead man is one less gun. A screaming man is a distraction to his friends." Fala nodded, her face grim. She did not look like a child anymore. She looked like a soldier. By the time the sun began to paint the peaks in shades of violet and rose, they were ready. Martha stood at the head of the valley. She had changed her appearance. Her gray hair was not in a bun. It was braided in 2 thick plaits that hung over her shoulders, and woven into the braids were small bones, crow skulls, vertebrae of snakes, polished white and stark against the dark hair. She had painted her face with a mixture of charcoal and fat, a black stripe across her eyes. She looked terrifying. She looked like the spirit of the mountain itself. She held William's Bowie knife in her hand. "Positions," she whispered. The women melted into the rocks. They did not hide in the caves this time. They hid behind the boulders, in the branches of the pines, in the tall grass. They knocked arrows. They cocked rifles. Eli took his place behind a fallen log near the entrance of the funnel. He had his Winchester and 2 Colts. He checked the loads. He checked the sight lines. Then they waited. The sound of hooves on stone came first. A chaotic clatter, loud and arrogant. Then voices, men laughing, men cursing the trail. They rode into view. It was a motley collection of hard cases, dust-caked dusters, low-slung holsters, eyes that scanned the tree line with predatory intent. At the front rode a man Eli recognized. Not Silas. Silas was there, riding second. But the leader was a man named Jack Kincaid, a bank robber from Kansas with a reputation for leaving no witnesses. Kincaid stopped his horse at the mouth of the bottleneck. He looked around the silent, "Green Valley. Pretty spot," Kincaid shouted. His voice echoed off the walls. "Awfully quiet, though." Silas rode up beside him. "They're here. Jack, I can smell 'em." "Good," Kincaid said. "I like to hunt." He raised his hand. "Ride in. Boys, flush 'em out." The column of riders spurred their horses forward. They hit the bottleneck at a trot. "Now!" Eli roared. Clara, perched high on the rim, slashed the rope holding the log. The log swung down, knocking the support beam away from the pile of boulders. The avalanche was a thunderclap. Tons of granite poured down the canyon wall. Crashing into the rear of the column, horses screamed. Men shouted as they were crushed or swept from their saddles. The exit was sealed. Panic erupted. The riders in the front tried to push forward, away from the falling rock. They hit the pits. The lead horse stepped onto the grass mat and plunged downward. The sickening crack of a breaking leg snapped through the air. The rider was thrown, landing hard in the dirt. "Fire!" Martha screamed from the trees. Arrows rained down. They were silent, deadly wasps. 2 men fell from their saddles with shafts protruding from their chests. Then the rifles opened up. The valley exploded into noise. Smoke filled the bottleneck, acrid and blinding. The outlaws, trapped between the rock slide and the hidden shooters, wheeled their horses in confusion. "Get off the horses!" Kincaid screamed, firing his revolvers blindly into the trees. "Fight on foot!" The men scrambled for cover behind the rocks. They began to return fire. Heavy buffalo guns boomed, chipping away the bark of the pines where the girls were hiding. Eli saw a group of 3 men, led by Silas, making a run for the left flank. They were trying to get up the slope, to get above the girls. "Oh, no, you don't," Eli growled. He broke cover. He ran low, dodging through the brush, flanking the flankers. He dropped to one knee and fired. He missed Silas, but he hit the man behind him. The man spun and fell. Silas saw him. "There he is," Silas yelled. "The $500 man." Silas and the remaining outlaw turned their guns on Eli. Bullets kicked up dirt into his eyes. He scrambled behind a boulder, pinned down. He heard the crunch of boots on gravel. They were rushing him. Eli drew his revolvers. He waited. 1 second. 2. He rolled out. He fired both guns at once. The outlaw on the right took a bullet in the throat and went down gurgling. But Silas was faster. Or maybe just lucky. Silas fired from the hip. The bullet slammed into Eli's left thigh, shattering the muscle. Eli went down hard. His leg gave out, hot agony blinding him. He dropped one of his pistols. He tried to scramble back, but his leg wouldn't work. He was a crab with a broken shell. Silas walked toward him, a cruel smile twisting his face under the beard. He cocked his rifle. "End of the road, Cowboy," Silas said. "I'm going to drag you back to Texas behind my horse." Eli reached for his dropped gun, but it was too far. He looked up at the muzzle of the rifle. Suddenly, a rope hissed through the air. A perfect loop settled over Silas's shoulders. Before Silas could react, the rope went taut with a violent jerk. He was yanked backward, off his feet, his rifle firing harmlessly into the sky. Eli looked up. Fala sat on her paint pony on the ridge above. The lariat wrapped around her saddle horn. She had backed the horse up, using the animal's weight to drag the man. "Keep the elbow down," Fala shouted, her voice fierce and triumphant. Silas was dragged over the sharp rocks, screaming. Eli grabbed his gun. He didn't hesitate. He put a bullet in Silas to end it. The rope went slack. Fala looked down at him, her eyes wide. "Thank you," Eli whispered. Then the shadow fell over him. Jack Kincaid had broken through the center line. He was a giant of a man, and he was enraged. He had lost half his men, and he wanted blood. He charged through the smoke, a machete in one hand, a pistol in the other. He was heading straight for the cluster of trees where the younger girls were reloading. Martha stepped out to meet him. She did not have a gun. She had thrown her rifle aside when it ran dry. She held only the Bowie knife. Kincaid laughed when he saw her. "An old woman with braids. Get out of my way, witch!" Kincaid roared. He raised the pistol. Martha did not flinch. She did not dodge. She moved like water flowing around a stone. She threw a handful of dust into his face. Kincaid sputtered, blinded for a split second. The pistol shot went wide. Martha closed the distance. She was a storm in buckskin. She ducked under the swing of his machete, moving with a speed that defied her age, defied her limp, defied physics. It was the speed of pure, distilled rage. She drove her shoulder into his gut, knocking the wind out of him. As he doubled over, she grabbed his hair, the thick, greasy mane of a killer. She swept the leg, kicking out his knee. Kincaid fell to his knees, his head pulled back, his throat exposed to the sky. Martha leaned in close. Her face, streaked with black paint and sweat, was inches from his. "You are on my land," she hissed. She drew the knife across his throat. It was a single, clean motion. The blade William had used to dress elk. The blade he had carried to defend a home he never built. Finally found its mark. Kincaid gurgled, his eyes bulging. Martha let him go. He slumped forward into the dirt, his blood soaking into the earth of the Valle de la Luna. Martha stood over him, chest heaving, the bloody knife in her hand. She looked around the battlefield. The remaining outlaws, seeing their leader dead and their numbers decimated, broke. They threw down their guns. They ran for the blocked pass, trying to scramble over the rock slide on foot. "Let them go!" Martha shouted to the girls who were raising their rifles. "Let them carry the story!" She watched them scramble away, disappearing down the shale. It was over. The sun was high now, burning off the morning mist. The valley was quiet again, save for the groans of the wounded and the heavy breathing of the victors. They gathered in the clearing. They were battered. Clara had a gash on her forehead. Agnes had broken her wrist swinging a shovel. 3 of the horses were dead, but they were alive. Martha walked among them, touching shoulders, checking wounds. She was no longer the terrifying spirit of vengeance. She was the matriarch again. She found Eli sitting against the log where he had fallen. Ruth was already there, cutting away his trouser leg. The blood was bright red, pooling in the grass. "It went through," Ruth said, looking up at Martha. "Missed the bone, but it tore the muscle badly." Martha knelt beside him. She dropped the knife and took his face in her hands. Her fingers left smears of war paint and blood on his skin. "You stayed," she whispered. "I told you." Eli gritted out through clenched teeth. "I belong here." He looked at Fala, who was standing nearby, coiling her rope with shaking hands. "She saved me," Eli said. "Perfect throw. Kept her elbow down." Martha looked at Fala. Pride, fierce and bright, shone in her dark eyes. "She is her mother's daughter," Martha said, "and her father's student." They carried Eli to the main cabin. The pain was a white-hot ocean, and he drifted in and out of consciousness as they cleaned the wound with boiled water and stitched it with horsehair thread. The recovery was slow. Winter came to the high country early that year. The snow fell in thick, silent sheets, burying the valley in white. But the cabins were warm. The wood piles were high. The larder was full. Eli lay in the bed of furs in the corner of the main room. His leg was stiff, and he knew he would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. A matched set with Martha. It was deep in the night, with the wind howling outside, when Martha came to him. She had washed the paint from her face, but the fierceness remained in her eyes. She sat on the edge of the bed. She pulled the furs back and looked at his bandaged leg, then at his chest, scarred from the war and the life he had led. She lay down beside him, curling her body against his side. She rested her head on his shoulder. Her hand splayed across his heart. "You are mine," she whispered into the darkness. Eli wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "I am yours," he answered. "No," she said, lifting her head to look at him. "You do not understand. You are not just my lover. You are my blood. You are my warrior, my wound, my man." She kissed him, slow and deep. "We have taken this land," she said. "We have watered it. Now we keep it." Months passed. The snow melted, retreating to the highest peaks. The valley exploded in wildflowers, blue columbine, Indian paintbrush, sunflowers. The stronghold was thriving. Word had traveled, carried on the wind, and by the few travelers they allowed to pass. The Valle de la Luna was a sanctuary. New faces appeared. Women running from abusive husbands, girls left behind by wagon trains, and, for the first time, boys, 2 young orphans, brothers found starving on the lower trail. They stood in the corral, holding practice swords made of wood. Eli stood leaning on a new cane, carved from willow. He watched them. "Keep your guard up," he called out. "If you drop your shield, you drop your life." Martha stood beside him. She was watching Fala teaching the younger girls how to fletch arrows. "They learn fast," Martha said. They have to. Eli said. He looked at her. She was wearing a shirt open at the neck, on a leather thong. She wore the ring she had taken from Thomas, and the stone from William's grave. She turned to him. Take off your shirt, she said. Eli looked at her, puzzled, but he complied. He unbuttoned the flannel and shrugged it off, exposing his chest to the warm spring sun. Martha reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pot of ink, made from soot and gall, and a sharp bone needle. Sit, she commanded. Eli sat on the bench. Martha stood between his knees. In my tribe, she said, dipping the needle into the ink. A warrior is marked when he has found his home, when he has ceased to wander. She placed the needle against the skin over his heart. This will hurt, she said. Eli looked into her eyes. I know. She began to tap the needle. Tap, 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 a rhythmic, stinging pain. She worked for an hour, her face focused, her breath warm on his skin. When she was done, Eli looked down. It was not a picture. It was a pattern, a circle of geometric lines, interlocking and unbreakable. In the center was a stylized hawk, and surrounding it, the shape of the mountains. It means he who stands, Martha said, wiping away the blood and excess ink. Eli ran his fingers over the raised, angry skin. He who stands, it fits, he said. The story closes on a late autumn evening, a year after the battle. Eli and Martha stood on the highest cliff overlooking the valley. The sun was setting the sky on fire with streaks of violet and burnt orange. Below them, the settlement was alive. Smoke rose from 6 chimneys, the sound of laughter, of children playing, of work being done, drifted up on the breeze. They stood shoulder to shoulder, 2 people broken by the world, scarred by loss, limping on bad legs. Eli looked at Martha. Her hair was gray as iron, her face a map of every storm she had weathered. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She looked at him, the drifter who had stopped running, the enemy who had become her heart. He put his arm around her waist. She leaned her head on his shoulder. We did it, Eli said softly. Martha looked out at the horizon, where the stars were just beginning to prick the darkness. We are just starting, she said. They stood there as the light faded, watching over their land, the matriarch and the scout, the iron and the earth, whole, finally, and ready for whatever the darkness might bring. Thank you all so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the dust and blood of the old frontier, exploring how 2 broken souls can find healing in the most unlikely of places. I hope Eli and Martha's story resonated with you. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you in the deserts of Arizona, the cities of Europe, or somewhere in between? Please leave a comment down below and tell me your location and your thoughts on the ending. Did they find the peace they deserved? If you enjoyed this tale, please make sure to subscribe to From Wild West for more stories of outlaws, heroes, and the untamed heart of the American frontier. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your eyes on the horizon.